What up, everybody? What up, what up, what up, what up, what up? It's Monday. It's 12 o'clock Central. It means it's time now for another edition of Showtime right here on Phantom, where we bring you to the center of the Dallas sports discussion. And the big story today will be about Earl Thomas, because free agency has started, and so Earl Thomas could very well sign with the Cowboys or another team while we're on the show today. So we'll be keeping an eye out for that, and also keeping an eye out to make sure that there's no Adam Schrifters who are getting in the way of us consuming real and actual news. You got to watch out for those darn Schrifters on days like today. Shout out to Wayne Gibson, Rick Shelker, Patty Dixon, Bradley Grimson. That's a lot of Gibson, Grimson, Dixon. That's a lot of similar. It's like a tongue twister, tongue-tied, whatever. It is what it is. At any rate, it's the start of the legal tampering period in the NFL, meaning players can now essentially agree to terms with other teams. So we shall see, and there's news and rumors coming fast and furiously. So we shall see on all those fronts. Shout out to everybody watching this. I'm Ari Temkin. You can catch me every day right here, 12 to 1. You can also catch me as part of the Big 12 network on Sirius XM, Big 12 this morning, 3 to 7, 7 to 10 a.m. every day. And today and all this week, you can catch me on the KNC Masterpiece on 105 through the Fan. I'll be with Corey Majors all this week on 105 through the Fan. So check that out as well. 7 to 9 tonight, 7 to 8:30 tomorrow, and then 7 to 11 the rest of the week. So a lot of me. But wherever you try to catch me, you could find me, I guess is the best way to say it. Okay. All right, so I'm going to get to Earl Thomas because I think this is a move the Cowboys could live to regret, which we'll get into. But first I wanted to start with a couple of house cleaning notes, which is Sean Lee returns. There was tons of conversations around the specifics of that deal and whether that's a good deal or a bad deal. Look, I think Sean Lee is really good. He just hasn't been able to stay healthy throughout the course of his career. He's not old. Like, that's the thing, is he's not old. He still can be a very, very valuable player for a team if healthy. At this point, he's been relegated to a nice sort of contingency plan piece for the Cowboys, which is actually amazingly why that's the part the Cowboys had to get to. And they got there, thankfully. But it's just funny because forever they were so reliant upon him and counting on him, and and it's like you had to get to a point where you had to be able to be okay with missing him, and now they finally are. And so they bring him back on a deal that is incentive laden. Basically, if he can realize the total value of that deal, which is I believe $7 million against the cap, if he appears and starts in 9 games for a playoff team. Right, so there's no injuries happen, the team's horrible, so he starts a bunch of games and gets paid the total value of the contract. He has to be starting 9 games for a playoff team to recognize and realize the total value of the contract. So to me, there's just no way that this is a bad deal. He's a really good player. He just hasn't been able to stay healthy, and he obviously is the type of player that can still play at a exceedingly high level if healthy. And also, by the way, the other parts of this too is the piece of Sean Lee. I'll get to your comments here in a moment. Keep those coming. But Sean Lee is like a quarterback for the defense. He is really good at reading offenses, understanding what they're trying to do. He's just a really valuable component to any successful franchise or any successful team. Type of leader you want, type of smart player that that. The reason he played as many snaps as he did in the Rams game is because the Rams, Sean McVay, were taking advantage of the young linebackers of the Cowboys. They needed a smarter guy that could sort of read the offense better than what Leighton Vander Esch and Jalen Smith could at that point in time last season. So I find no fault or flaw in not just cutting Sean Lee outright. I think bringing him back at a reduced cost, probably something along the lines of $3.5 million. Perhaps the other $3.5 million he may be able to achieve or get to, but it'd be very difficult for me to think that would be the case. All right, I will have Twitter up the whole day today too, just to make sure that I'm not missing out on any important news. Looks like the Giants this according to the New York Daily News, but Giants have been in contact with Cardinals free agent Deion Buchanan, outside linebacker, started 41 games, 3 seasons. So it's kind of interesting. All right, keep those comments and questions coming, by the way. Let's see here. John Martin says he's only injured so much because he sacrificed his body and never played to make all the plays for the defense. Brian Walker says, give me Landon Collins over Earl Thomas. He's younger. I disagree with that, but I'll tell you why here in a moment. Other piece of news, I guess, is that we learned that Byron Jones is not a priority, not one of the top 5 guys that the Cowboys are looking at in terms of locking up long term. I think this is stupid. The Cowboys shouldn't make up their decision on Byron Jones already. They can't, right? They shouldn't be paying Byron Jones right now, because why would you pay a guy he's at the highest point right now? Like, the value of him in terms of the open market, like it's never been higher. He's a first team All-Pro, best cornerback in the NFL basically. So don't pay him now. You wait. You let him play out the 5th year of his 5-year contract, the 5th year deal of his rookie contract, and then you evaluate based on how he played that year, how much money he wants, what you have left in salary. The idea here that the Cowboys have already made up their mind in terms of long-term on Byron Jones, Tyson, the West Coast Cowboys, a buddy of mine, he runs the Dallas Cowboys scouting page. He suggested a couple of weeks ago, Cowboys just trade Byron Jones to try to get back into the first round. Like, go to the Chiefs and see if you can get, the Chiefs' first-round pick for Byron Jones. And at the time, I disagreed with that. I just don't. I think if this team intends to win this season, losing Byron Jones and gaining a first-round pick doesn't exactly help you with that. But if they've already made up their mind on him and they're not going to pay him, then you've got a decent argument to be made in terms of trading him, Byron Jones, for a first-round draft pick if you can get it. And if not, remember, he walks after next season, and you're still going to end up with a compensatory pick, which sometimes could be greater than having him for the year and then getting that compensatory pick, as opposed to trading now, having that pick, but not having him during the year. But they shouldn't be paying him now. His value is so high. They're not at a very leverageable position, the Cowboys, because he's had his best season and he was first team All-Pro. But let it play out next year, see how he plays. If he gets to first-team All-Pro next year, then he's probably been priced out of your market, but he's also now shown back-to-back years of being first-team All-Pro. If he doesn't go first-team All-Pro and he regresses a little bit, but still, you just don't know what the price tag is going to be. So to say that, well, we prioritize these guys over those guys, like, I guess you have to come up with that in terms of what the hierarchy is this offseason, but I don't know that I think you can just write it in stone and say he's not a priority. It seems really, really stupid. All right, let's get to the big topic at hand today. I don't want to waste any more time talking about this other stuff, and that is that the Cowboys could very well live to regret the Earl Thomas move. And, oh no, I've covered my face. There we go. So the reason I say that is that may lead you to think that I'm saying if they sign him, it's a move they could regret, or if they don't sign him, it's a move they could regret. And the answer to that question is yes. This is a very, very important move, because it's the move that if they make, they could regret, and if it's the move that they don't make, they could regret, right? So we have talked a long time about Earl Thomas. This goes back to the last offseason when we were talking about the Cowboys trying to make a push to get Earl Thomas. Obviously, it didn't happen. They were interested then. They remain interested now. There's been conflicting reports that have come out really in the last week, sort of about the actual interest the Cowboys have in Earl Thomas. First there was the reports coming out of the Combine that he wanted $13 million, and that, as a product of that, they didn't think that it would be an option at all, because that would just be pricing the Cowboys out of their market. Basically, Calvin Watkins and others were reporting after the Combine the Cowboys were not interested in Earl Thomas anymore because the price was too high. But now we've heard in recent days, Ian Rappaport, the NFL Network, and others reporting that the Cowboys are actually interested still, and they're not out of the Earl Thomas discussion. So it's kind of like, well, what do we believe? Do we believe that the Cowboys believe that Earl wants too much and therefore are priced out of his market, or do we believe that might have been just some noise that they were trying to throw out there? Because remember that these are all leveraging, negotiating tactics. So perhaps they were saying, well, we're not interested, though they knew that he would remain interested, because Earl Thomas is very, very interested in becoming a member of the Dallas Cowboys. What do you think? Do you think the Cowboys have a ceiling and that ceiling, if Earl Thomas says he wants to be the highest paid safety in football, there's no chance that they can go do it? Or do you think that the Cowboys are very interested in being there, and they're hoping that they maybe they don't get him at the highest price that he wants, but rather something closer, and that because it's the Cowboys and he's just interested in the Cowboys, he'd be willing to take that. Jose Flores says, with his age and latest injury, is he worth the $15 million he's wanting? 15's an even higher number than what we heard at 13. We'll see. I mean, is he at his age at that position worth $15 million a year? Probably not. The market will dictate what he's worth, right? Because what you're worth is basically what the market is willing to pay you. 15 is too rich, 13 probably too rich, but where's that medium between 13 and 10, right? Like 10 to 13. What's the difference there? And then, of course, we're talking about what's the long-term ramifications of a deal like that. Hit the share button. I'm Ari Temkin. This is the beginning stages of NFL free agency, so we are as pumped as you are about what's going on right now and who's signing where. And even though it's the team, teams can't legally sign players yet, this is the legal tampering period, so players can sign without signing, Keep those comments coming. I'll try to get to them as quickly as I possibly can. Let's see here. Sylvia Torres, could Lewis move to corner, lose Jones, and pick up Thomas? Could they move Jordan Lewis into Byron Jones' spot? Sure. Byron Jones is first team All-Pro at corner. So, there's a give and a take there, obviously. Casey Coleman says they give anybody a show these days, I see. Interesting. They do, Casey. They do. I'm kind of offended by that, but only kind of. Because they do give anybody a show these days. Literally, Facebook. Anybody can get one. All you have to do is just, start streaming. Let's see. Daniel Lozano, Earl Thomas would sure up that secondary, so losing Jones won't hurt so bad if we do. Jeff Capone says G-Bag Nation today said they would pay Earl $30 for 2 years. And that's like, the Cowboys have to balance the salary cap in terms of long term, right? Like, so I don't know that I would be opposed. I don't know that I would be as opposed to a 2-year deal at $15 million annually as opposed to a 4 or 5 year deal at $13 million annually, right? It's the longer term ramifications of having to pay the guaranteed money, and then perhaps keeping up, the dead money if if this guy doesn't perform to his level. So I think, like with most, I'd be more willing if I'm the Cowboys to go higher money on a shorter term deal. But who knows if that's something that Earl Thomas is interested in, right? I mean, a couple of extra million here, like if he's getting offered $13 million over 4 years versus $15 million over 2, like what are the chances he's gonna be able to make up the 2 years that he's not gonna have? And then there's the guaranteed part of it. So it's interesting. But I would certainly, if I'm the Cowboys, love a higher money deal shorter term. And maybe you do something like you guarantee the majority of the money or something that really entices him. We'll see. But the question now, I guess, is, well, there's a couple of things here, first of all. Johnny Kaz says, what up, Ari? Frugal season has begun. I wish Jerry never had Steven. I liked Crazy Jerry. That's always, I mean, the people that thought that Jerry Jones did too much mingling, too much meddling, this is the time of year where Jerry did his best work in terms of just making splashes and making Cowboys fans excited about the year to come. It might not have been the best deals, but deals nonetheless, and so people are excited about those, obviously. Deshaun Jackson now has said goodbye to Tampa Bay officially, so wondering now where Deshaun Jackson ends up. If it's not with the Cowboys, then certainly I'd like to see him not in the NFC East, for the love of God. And look, I don't know. I mean, it kind of depends for me in terms of what the contract looks like. I definitely want to be upgrading at the wide receiver position, and I feel like he could do that. And he's a unique talent. So we shall see. All right. The Dallas Cowboys America's team page. Shout out to Chandler Reams. Says would love him, but I can't see him only wanting 11. Would be awesome though. So again, last week the reports were the Cowboys were out because it was too expensive. It was too rich for their blood. But then we hear from Rappaport and then others that, well, maybe not so much. Maybe they are still interested, and that the reports that it was too expensive were sort of perhaps posturing within the media to, to get Earl Thomas to come down a little bit, because Earl Thomas wants to play for the Cowboys. He's made that clear. But how much less he's willing to take in order to do that, that remains to be seen. And that, that's the thing is, like, the free agent legal tampering period starts today. Within the next 3 days, everybody's going to be signed. Everybody's going to have a new destination. So by the time Wednesday rolls around, when teams can actually sign these players, as opposed to now where they're just being reported and they're not actually able to legally sign them, then we'll see. But ultimately, Earl Thomas, it's going to get done quickly. It could get done right now. Looks like Jane Slater, by the way, reporting that Earl Thomas wants a deal of 2 years at $30 million. Jane said reportedly rumored to be wanting a deal in the market of 2 years at $30 million. And then Jane Slater says, I said rumored to be, but can now confirm at least in the market of 14 a year per source. He wants to beat Eric Berry's number, which is roughly 13 per season. Is that too much? All right, let's just throw it out there. Earl Thomas wants a deal, 2 years, $30 million. I'm assuming because it's short term, he's going to want a lot of that guaranteed. If you're the Cowboys, do you do that? Is that something you're willing to do? Because if you think about how you could space this thing out, then maybe you say to DeMarcus Lawrence, all right, we can sign you to this deal, but we're going to put most of the guaranteed money after the Earl Thomas money comes off the books. So you can kind of space that out so you're not basically paying, two players in your defense $35 million a year in a salary cap of $188 million. Would $15 million a year over 2 years be a deal you'd be willing to take? Sean Moore, ET's best days are in the rearview mirror. You don't pay him for the money the Seahawks didn't give him when he was in his prime. Jeff Capone says yes. Derek Throne says sounds expensive. So again, Jane Slater says it's rumored to be 2 years, 30. She said she confirmed he wants at least $14 million. He just wants he wants to be the highest paid safety in the history of the NFL. He wants a bigger deal than Eric Berry got, which you might laugh at, but at the same time, he is one of the best safeties to ever play. He might be the best safety to ever play. So it's not just that unreasonable to expect him to want to be the highest paid safety ever, because he probably feels like, hey, I'm the best safety ever. Chandler Ream says he was a unanimous selection for All-Pro by all NFL coaches without an interception. If that doesn't tell you how good a corner he is without any picks, I don't know what to tell you. Do I wish he had more picks? Of course, but still an amazing corner. Talking about Byron Jones, and that kind of cuts both ways, I think. It could be a reason for why you think he's really good. To be that good and not come up with picks shows that you are really good in coverage. But the other side of that, too, is what kind of a value does a great corner have if he's not creating interceptions? Right? And that's kind of always been his deal. All right, we'll try to get to you all these rumors as they're cycling through Twitter. According to Chris Mortensen, Raiders will probably not sign former Steelers running back Le'Veon Bell because they don't have enough real cash. Is that serious? Not enough real cash? Interesting. What? They've got salary cap space. It's the money they don't have. Well, then how are they going to spend the rest of the cap? They don't have any money. They're out of money. You see, Al Davis didn't really leave a lot of money for his son, so his son's kind of fending for himself. Joanne Razor says no to Earl Thomas. Diego Maista says, I love Earl Thomas, and he's great and all, but his injury history is a major concern. 15 is way too steep. Zach Kazos says, I'd rather keep Byron than pay for Earl at this point. Nick Wolf says, we can't even pay D-Law. It ain't going to happen. I wouldn't say that they can't pay D-Law. I would, however, say that they're willing to negotiate with D-Law. They can pay D-Law. They assuredly will pay D-Law. I would rather the Cowboys give a short-term commitment to Earl Thomas. Like, I'd rather them pay him 2 years at $15 million a year than 4 or 5 years at $13 million a year. You know, that to me is, I'm willing to bet that if he can stay healthy in the next 2 seasons, that he will most likely be worth the money that he's going to get. All right, so ultimately, here's my feeling on Earl Thomas. And I've said this a lot. I've kind of gone back and forth on whether or not they should sign him. I think there's a major priority in offensive football. Obviously, scoring is more important than not scoring. You need to score to win in the NFL, and you can only score on offense for the most part. The best way to build a sustainable type team is to score on offense, obviously. But so I've gone back and forth in terms of, like, I definitely think that the Cowboys need to invest the majority of the salary cap space they have into improving their offense so they can become one of the top scoring offenses in the NFL. But the thing about Earl Thomas is that he's special, and that's the thing is you can't, the Cowboys need to upgrade at safety, sure. But I'm not going to pay significant money to upgrade at safety unless it's for Earl Thomas because he's a special player. He is a very unique player. He's a ball-hawking safety. He is a turnover machine. He does exactly what the Cowboys and basically 31 other NFL teams have a major void at, but more specifically the Cowboys. Why? Because they have not been able to generate and create turnovers consistently on defense really over the last 3-4 years. They've just not been good at it. And they've won despite it, but that's just not, you need to be better at turning teams over. And the thing is, a lot of turnovers tend to be sort of a product of luck. Turnovers can be a product of luck. There's a lot of luck involved in creating turnovers. However, Earl Thomas is one of the types that sort of transcends that. There's less luck involved because he's such a skilled player that plays the position unlike anybody we've ever seen. So I think, like, sometimes you can see some guys, like, have short-term success in the NFL because they have 1 year where it's like they're turnover machines because they're just in the right spot at the right times. Earl Thomas has made a career out of that, which means it's not a luck factor. It's just a factor of him understanding where he needs to be and then being athletic enough and great enough to be able to get into the right spots. Earl Thomas is the type of game-changing player that I'd be willing to pay for on defense. Okay, I don't. Anybody that's like, I'd rather them sign Landon Collins over Earl Thomas, I understand the reasons for that. I'd rather go with the track record Earl Thomas has in terms of being able to turn teams over, being consistent at that. I'd rather pay for that. If it's not Earl Thomas, I'd rather pay that money to go and help the offense because there's just not a game-changing type player. There are a lot of good players at that position, but there's nobody that changes games as often as Earl Thomas has. Here's the other piece, too. We've talked a lot about his injury history, right? He played in 16 games in 6 consecutive seasons. In the last 3 years, he's missed a chunk of games due to injury. The truth of the matter is he missed the most of his games this past year with a broken leg. So he's every year he's been in the NFL, he's played at least 10 games. That's pretty good, right? Obviously, you'd like 16 games, but 10's pretty good. So it's not like, the last 3 years he's missed tons of games. He played in 11 in 2016 and 14 in 2017, right? So it's 11, 14, and then 4. So the sample of the amount of games that he's missed, you look at it's skewed by the fact that he missed 12 games this year. He only missed 2 games the prior season and then 5 games the year before that. And here's the other thing too. We're talking about in a couple of broken feet. Couple of broken feet. Yeah, he broke his foot in 2016 and he broke his foot this past year. Right, like so, an Achilles tear, a little bit different than a broken foot, right? Broken foot is a pretty cut and dried. There's no gray area type injury, right? Like you break your foot, the foot heals, right? Like you go through the process, you come back, and you can make that foot as strong, perhaps even stronger than it was before. So the other parts of this injury thing that I sort of think is going underappreciated is the type of injuries that one is the games missed beyond last year, and I know that Charles Grau brings up 19 games missed, but he missed 12 this past year, right? So that's the big piece, is he only played in 4 games this past year, but played in 14 the year before that, 11 the year before that. So in 2 years, I mean, you're talking about 7 missed games. It's a decent amount, but Not as many as Sean Lee has missed or other players have missed too. And then it's the piece of what's the nature of the injury? The broken foot thing, like that, it's not the same as other injuries that linger. That you know what I mean? Like a lot of soft tissue injuries can linger. You can come back and not be the same type player. Like there's a history and a precedent that suggests that, Whereas I think when you look at sorry about that. Whereas when you look at like a broken foot, again, it's a pretty cut and dried type thing. It's the return from that is pretty obvious and pretty laid out. And again, I don't know that it lingers as much as soft tissue type injuries. So I've talked myself into the fact that the Cowboys should overpay for Earl Thomas simply because I think Earl Thomas is that good and he's that much of a difference maker. And there he is flicking off his team because he's got some tood, which I like. Like a good dude. All right, so Todd Archer, by the way, I wanted to make mention of this. Todd Archer on Twitter, Todd Archer, ESPN, Dallas Cowboys Insider, says, clearly it's early on in the legal tampering period, but the sense is that things will be quiet with the Cowboys the next few days in free agency. The focus is still on their own players, especially DeMarcus Lawrence. While everybody wants to connect the Earl Thomas dots, the feeling is the price will be a lot more than what the Cowboys want to pay. Holy crap, what to believe? What to believe? What to believe? What do we believe here? Do we believe that the Cowboys are in it? Or do we believe that the Cowboys feel like the price is too steep and they're not going to be willing to do it? And then who else will the Cowboys be going after? Because, and this is kind of the point that I made last week, but you're not going all in if you're bringing back the same roster. You're not. And all we've heard in the last... how long is Jerry talking about we're going all in? We're going all in. My time is running out. But we even heard Steven and Jason sort of mention the whole, idea of backs against the wall, feeling that like we need to do something now. So if we're to believe that this is true, that the motivation for the Cowboys is to go out and make the moves that help them win because they feel like they're close with the talent that they have, like going all in is not bringing back the team that they just had. And that's what they're on pace to do right now. You can talk about Jason Witten coming back, and that certainly makes a little bit of a change in what they do in the draft, but that's not like that. That's running it back. That's running it back. And we've heard the Cowboys say that in the offseason too. We'll run it back. We like. I think it was after the and that might have been the biggest mistake they made after the 2016 season when they were like, we'll run it back in terms of not going out and trying to spend some money in free agency because they had a quarterback on a cheap contract. The reason that I say Cowboys and Earl Thomas, the move the Cowboys could regret for years, is because if they don't make the deal, and Earl Thomas goes out and signs with somebody else and does what he's done throughout the course of his career, which is, 16 games, tons of, tons of tackles, 5-6 interceptions, right? Like it's going to be a move that they regretted, right? Not going out there and signing. There isn't a player that they could sign that has the talent level and ability of an Earl Thomas. There isn't at any position. There's no game changer available on the market like Earl Thomas. That's the allure of signing Earl Thomas. But the other piece to this is the other regret, which is they could sign him, say, a 2-year deal, $30 million, right? $15 million annually, tons of money. And now what we've seen from Earl Thomas the last 3 years comes to fruition for him in the ensuing few years. That he's limited to 6-7 games a year. Now all of a sudden you've paid a guy $15 million a year, mostly guaranteed over 2 years, who's not really helping you in the majority of games. So there's obviously the total risk, but the move that they make, whether they make it or they don't make it, could be something that the Cowboys completely and utterly regret. And that's why I'd rather regret making the move and going all in than regret not making the move because we just thought it was a little bit too rich. And I think at the end of the day, I mean, we're talking about the difference of what? Where are they willing to go with Earl Thomas? Like what's the price? Would they go to 10 million, 11 million a year? So I mean, if he wants 14 million, what's over 2 years? Like you're really gonna, I mean, just a couple more million, all of a sudden now that's the complete difference here. I want to get a couple of these updates from the NFL Network because Jane Slater's great, and it's always great to hear her vantage point of all of this stuff. So let's see if we can bring this on here in a moment, if we can. So bear with me as I try to do this on the fly. But I'm going to try to. While I'm doing that, post your comments and questions. But yeah, I mean, Earl Stokes says, any chance that Garrett changes his coaching strategies this year with his ass in the line? I hope so. I think that's what a lot of Cowboys fans hope at this point, is a willingness for Jason Garrett to sort of be something that he hasn't really been over the course of his time as being the head coach of the Cowboys. All right, well, we can probably just play this as is, as long as I've got the audio on and such. All right, let's see here. Here we go.
For every rumor or whisper that I have run down as it pertains to Earl Thomas coming to Dallas, I'd already be retired on an island. It's just simply not happening right now. Now, my colleague Ian Rappaport reported that the Cowboys are still very much in on Earl Thomas, and that is true in theory. But right now, his current asking price, matched with his age and his injuries, is just something the Cowboys are having a hard time stomaching. They've attempted to go after Thomas in the past, but right now they feel pretty content with what they've got inside the building. Now, I do anticipate that they'll be active with some of these smaller tier players as it comes to filling up this roster, but don't expect them to be overly active with the top tier guys. As it was explained to me regarding DeMarcus Lawrence, it applies to Earl Thomas as well. They are not going to overpay a player if that means breaking up this team.
They're not going to overpay a player if that means breaking up this team. So if signing a player means they can't sign DeMarcus Lawrence, they can't sign Dak Prescott, or they can't sign Amari Cooper, then they won't do it. Is Zeke Elliott part of that conversation? As if you may know, I say I hope not. You can't pay a running back that much. You can't. And then when you pay him that much, then you have to, then you're committed to, to giving him tons of carries. Which, again, something that I don't think is the right move in this day and age in the NFL. So, where was that other Jane Slater video that I wanted to play? I'll find that in a second here, but that was about DeMarcus Lawrence. So, look, I think Jane is as plugged in as anybody, and it seems like everybody we've heard from close to the Cowboys says, like Jane Slater, Mike Fisher, Calvin Watkins, like all of the people that are, plugged into the Cowboys and are breaking Cowboys news in Dallas, they're the ones saying that they don't see how the Cowboys can swing it in terms of the types of price that Earl Thomas wants. Ian Rappaport, that knows a little bit, he claims that the Cowboys are still very much in it. So, locally it seems like there's a different reality than what is nationally the perspective of it. And I don't really know what the driving force is here, but I'd hope they'd still be in it, because if it's a shorter-term deal on big money, I'd probably be more willing to do it and then negotiate the players I want to play, I want to pay, to sort of fit around a shorter deal for Earl Thomas. But again, Earl Thomas is a different cat. He's a different player. There's no player in the open market at any position that has the type of impact on the game that Earl Thomas has, period. And then, of course, there's the Chris Richard familiarity factor that only heightens sort of the need for a guy like Earl Thomas. I know somebody commented about, what about Honey Badger? Is he on that level? No, he's not. Just look at the consistency in terms of interceptions, year over year, turnovers. Honey Badger at 23 years old had 5 interception season. I mean, look at Earl Thomas, what he does consistently in terms of 5 interception seasons. Also, remember, the Cowboys passed on Honey Badger. Like, they already said thanks but no thanks on Honey Badger. So, like, what's weird to me is Tyrann Mathieu was available last year towards the end of free agency as it was clear that the Cowboys and other teams were not exactly spending tons of money on safeties. He was out there. I think he signed with the Texans for like $1 million. Now his price tag's gone up to $9 million or something. But if he was available last offseason, the Cowboys passed on paying him. Well, I don't know why they would be interested in paying him now. All right, Ian Rappaport is reporting now that the 49ers have signed linebacker Quan Alexander to a 4-year deal with $54 million, which is important to note because they're a team that's reportedly interested in signing Earl Thomas. So if the fact is that the 49ers are one of the teams interested, now they've put $54 million over 4 years into Quan Alexander. We don't have the numbers in terms of guaranteed money on that deal, but that could change the arithmetic a little bit for the 49ers. If they are indeed interested in Earl Thomas. But again, I've gone back and forth on whether or not to pay Earl Thomas. I think I've sort of suddenly settled on pay him, especially if it's not just this horrible behemoth of a long-term contract, because there just is no player on the open market available like him in terms of game changer week in and week out at the position. In terms of creating turnovers, he's just a turnover machine. He does something the Cowboys haven't had, and then of course the leadership, the ability to understand the defense, those kinds of things. I mean, look at this. Tyrann Mathieu, just trying to compare them. Tyrann Mathieu has won 5 interception season, one of them. Earl Thomas in his career has 1, 2, 3, 5 interception seasons. He had 3 picks last year in 4 games. Now, obviously, 2 of them came against the Cowboys, but still, like 3. He has 3 seasons of at least 5 interceptions in his career. That's insane. 28 picks over a 9-year career. That's a lot of times interceptions can be a product of luck. Right player, right time, right season. But when you do that over the course of multiple seasons, it's clearly a skill set of yours, and an ability of yours. And it's not just that. He forces fumbles. I mean, he had a season really. The one season he only had 1 interception. He had 4 fumbles, 4 forced fumbles. So it's like he's gonna turn teams over regardless of how you spin it. Period. And that's why, like, he's the one guy on defense beyond DeMarcus Lawrence I'd be willing to overpay, because I'd rather, again, I would rather take the money. I would rather take the money and spend it on offense unless it's to sign Earl Thomas. And then there's the other piece, which is what the Patriots have done, and I just find this so interesting. That the Patriots allowed Trey Flowers to walk. He'll get between 18 and 20 million a year as a pass rusher from somebody in the open market. They trade for Michael Bennett, so they're going to basically get a difference of about 18 million or whatever it ends up working out. I mean, I don't know what Michael Bennett's getting, but it's, insignificant relative to what Trey Flowers will get. They end up with a compensatory pick, probably a 3rd round pick next year because of Trey Flowers, depending on how well he plays this year. And then next year they let Michael Bennett walk. They do this dance all over again and get another compensatory pick when he walks. Trent Brown, I beg your pardon, signed a huge deal with the Raiders. Another guy that they're going to end up with another 3rd round compensatory pick because Trent Brown leaves the Patriots, signs a big deal, somewhere else. So this is what they do. They don't pay guys. They paid one guy. That's Tom Brady. They have a very, very finite amount of, this is how much we're going to spend on these positions, and otherwise they let you walk. And they're fine with it. And they end up getting compensatory picks, which they then turn into guys that ball out for 5 years on the cheap or 4 years on the cheap, and then they trade those guys, or rather they let those guys walk because they'd rather get the compensatory pick than trade them unless they think the compensatory pick doesn't exceed the value of what they'd get at the trade. It's brilliant. Sean Moore says, Ari wants to massively overpay on 2 players in defense but beats the desk and tells us the only way to win is to have a dynamic offense. Make up your mind. Well, look, I would be reluctant to overpay DeMarcus Lawrence. I might even look at what the Patriots have done. Let DeMarcus Lawrence walk and get your compensatory pick for him and see if you could, trade for Michael Bennett to make up for that lost production, right? To me, Earl Thomas is the difference. There's nobody else on defense. I'm not saying if you don't sign Earl Thomas, now go after Landon Collins or Adrian Amos. To me, Earl Thomas is the guy that I'm going after. There's nobody else that brings that skill set to the table that is a difference maker on defense. There are very few players or very few positions that make as much of an impact on a football game as Earl Thomas can on defense. But yes, the Cowboys need a more dynamic offense. We know that they need to score more points. They can't be 22nd in points, and they're probably not going to get there top 10 in points or top 5 in points with the status quo on offense, with the only change being that they have made to their offensive coordinator, right? So, I recognize those two things don't exactly make sense. Put most of your money on offense, but hey, go overpay Earl Thomas or DeMarcus Lawrence. I mean, to me, it's a matter of if you're able to get a shorter term deal with more guaranteed money on the books for Earl Thomas, now I can use those 2 years that I'm overpaying for Earl Thomas. And by the way, if he's healthy the majority of those games and plays 90 to 95% of the snaps over 2 years, you're not overpaying for Earl Thomas at $15 million. You're not. But you can also then use the 2 years to sort of not restructure, but then figure out how to pace other. I mean, you can kind of maneuver on a shorter deal with guaranteed money for Earl Thomas than you could with more of a long-term deal where you're committed longer term into more money. Then you're restructuring, then you're going to owe him a lot more money when he's older, and you're not. That's where you get dead money in the way, and it becomes a major problem. Rick Polito says safeties stand on the shoulders of a powerful pass rush up front. Can the boys afford both? But I mean, I don't. There's no absolutes there. Like, I've gone back and forth in terms of what makes a pass rush. Is it a great secondary, or is it, what makes a great defense? Is it having the great pass rush that allows the secondary to not have to let guys open, or is it vice versa? Right? Does a great secondary open up a good pass rush? Because you can make the argument and see examples of a good secondary making your pass rush better, and vice versa, a great pass rush making the secondary better. You do. There's ample examples of both. This is not a positional thing. To me, Earl Thomas transcends positional needs. I don't think the Cowboys have as glaring of a need at safety as everybody believes they do. I'm not spending a ton of money on the safety position unless it's Earl Thomas because he's a game changer. Because he impacts games in ways that very few on defense can. That's why. Zach Cazo says they need turnovers with the way they built this team. It's a ball control offense that needs a few extra possessions here and there. Every game they will play will be close. Yeah, agreed. And the problem is they haven't created tons of turnovers. So I mean, it's a ball control. It's a ball control type offense that hasn't really created turnovers. So it's been a problem. Now I also think that the idea of it being a ball control type offense is sort of like that's not. You don't want that. You can't have that. I have a problem with that. So again, we heard from Jane Slater what she was reporting. We can play that again for you if you missed it. But Jane Slater, like most others inside Dallas, are reporting something that sort of invalidates what Ian Rappaport and we've heard from some national people. It's like the local people are saying, no, the Cowboys are not going to be doing that for Earl Thomas or spending that much money on Earl Thomas. And then there's, national people like, yeah, they're still very much in it. So which one is it? All right, let's hear Jane again.
$1 for every rumor or Add $1 for every rumor or whisper that I have run down as it pertains to Earl Thomas coming to Dallas. I'd already be retired on an island. It's just simply not happening right now. Now, my colleague Ian Rappaport reported that the Cowboys are still very much in on Earl Thomas, and that is true in theory. But right now, his current asking price, matched with his age and his injuries, is just something the Cowboys are having a hard time stomaching. They've attempted to go after Thomas in the past, but right now they feel pretty content with what they've got inside the building. Now, I do anticipate that they'll be active with some of these smaller tier players as it comes to filling up this roster, but don't expect them to be overly active with the top tier guys. As it was explained to me regarding DeMarcus Lawrence, it applies to Earl Thomas as well. They are not going to overplay a player if that means breaking up this team.
So again, these are expectations of what the Cowboys are in 2019, right? They are not a team that is going to be spending and in making news this time of year. Right? They allow the market to come to them. They have confidence in their own players. They're very methodical. And, they're just traditionally not active at this time of year. And I think that just doesn't jive with the notion that we've heard that this year's different because they're going all in. In 2016, they talked about running it back. Okay, well, running it back is different than going all in. The Cowboys right now have set up their the expectation is for them to not be active, and yet at the same time they're saying that they're going all in to win this year. But you can't say you're going all in when you bring back the same roster, can you? I don't think so. That doesn't notate going all in. That notates that's a different notation altogether. That is we're running it back with the same team. So on the one hand, we've heard Jerry, Steven, and Jason Garrett talk about going all in or alluding to something about backs against the wall and play with a greater coach with a greater sense of urgency and build a roster with a greater sense of urgency. So, the way that we expect this offseason to go and the way that it's gone so far tells a vastly different story than a team that's going all in. A team that goes all in goes and takes risks and signs Earl Thomas. That's going all in. Teams that want to run it back, and I'm not saying that there's an issue if the Cowboys want to run it back. What I'm saying is they've been telling us they're going all in, but any sort of examples we have or anything that we've seen from this team looks like they're not going all in. That's just what they're saying, unless they view going all in as bringing back the same roster they had last year and having overconfidence in their own guys. If the Cowboys have a flaw in the modern era, it's having a greater value on their own people. They are committed. They are almost ignorantly committed to their own people, like to a fault. I mean, look at Jason Garrett. Jason Garrett's the perfect example of this, but it shows itself on the field too. The confidence that they have in their own guys is stunning. And look, they have drafted exceedingly well. And so they have major reasons to have a ton of confidence in their own guys. But that's just not how the NFL and championship teams work. You have to be able to take risks in free agency to shore up holes at positions that you haven't hit at. And I'd say the Cowboys haven't hit at safety. The Cowboys are okay at safety. The Cowboys didn't lose to the Rams because they had Jeff Heath and Xavier Woods at safety. They didn't. But Earl Thomas is a transcendent player. He's a first ballot Hall of Famer. And that's even if he doesn't play another snap in the National Football League. He's had 2 broken feet over 3 injuries over the course of the last 3 seasons. He missed 12 games this past year, but before that was held to just 5 in 2016, missing 5 games in 2016 and missing 2 games in 2017. So the oft-injured tag is kind of up for debate. Now, he is going to be 30 soon. So it certainly bears reason that some of the reasons for his injuries are because he's getting older, but we don't know that, and a broken foot doesn't exactly notate that. And I would rather pay and get the and have the risk blow up in my face than not pay and have the risk blow up in my face the other way. Nothing ventured, nothing gained. Nothing ventured, nothing gained. There's a fear for the Cowboys. If you pay this guy, it could completely hamstring your organization because of health concerns, and I get it. But at some point, you have to take a leap of faith on a guy that allows you to tell your fan base, hey, I know that we've been saying we're going to go all in, but we haven't really meant it until now. All right, I'm Ari Temkin. This is Showtime on Phantom. Keep it here, close to Phantom throughout free agency, because if lightning strikes and the Cowboys do intend to be players the opening days of free agency, then we're going to be live reacting with it to you as soon as it happens. So make sure to go, if you haven't yet already, to facebook.com/watchphantom. You can also make sure to hit that subscribe button over on YouTube. Shout out to all you watching on YouTube. I have not gotten to all your comments, and my apologies for that. I see Joseph Candelaria and many others over there, and I'll try to get to those comments as quickly as I can. Tony Larza says, man, shut up. That wouldn't make a very... Should I just sit here in silence and just be like, what? Man, shut up. Okay. It doesn't sound very entertaining. William White, realistically, who do you think will pick up, Ari, if anyone? I mean, realistically, I think it'd be Earl Thomas. If there's any big name that they're going to pick up, it'd be Earl Thomas. He's been the guy that they've most been linked to. I wonder why Tony Yarza wanted me to shut up. Is it because he just saw the headline and then assumed I was talking about why the Cowboys shouldn't sign him because they'd regret it? Even though what I'm saying is really they could sign him and regret it, or they could not sign him and regret it, because they don't really know and they have to make the right decision right now, because that's the reality that faces them today. They could sign him and make a mistake and regret it, or they could not sign him and make a mistake and regret it. I would rather be the aggressor. I would rather make the move that I think puts me over the top, that brings leadership to a defense that has a bunch of young players, that brings a history to a defense that suggests he's a ball hawker and he brings to the table what they haven't had in years, and a familiarity with your defensive coordinator. I'd rather be the aggressive one and regret being aggressive than not being aggressive, sitting back, worrying about injuries, worrying about this, worrying about that, spending frugally, doing what the Cowboys have done, and then seeing the same results. I would rather take the risk, be the aggressive one, and at least die on my sword. All right, I'm Ari Temkin. This is Showtime on Phantom. Make sure to join us again tomorrow. And, of course, if anything breaks on the Cowboys, I'll be right here live to bring it to you as soon as I possibly can. In DFW, make sure to check out the KNC Masterpiece tonight. I'm going to be on with Corey Majors starting at 7 o'clock tonight, and I'll be on all this week. So make sure to check it out on 105.3 The Fan locally or on the radio.com app. Other than that... shout out to Quincy Wheeler and to Rick Shelker and to Joe Tranchina and to Chris Bennett and to Bobby Morehouse and Cody Arnold and William White and Cole Peterson and Rick Polito and Charles Graw and Rafael Menezes and Zach Kazos and Michael Lafferty and Angelina Martinez and Sean Moore and Daniel Lozano and Ginny Erie. And man, this family's growing. So keep us helping to grow it as we continue to bring you live and interactive Dallas sports content 365 days in the year. Okay, maybe not 365, but 52 weeks times 5, a lot of content. Other than that, make sure again to go like the page at facebook.com/watchphantom, subscribe on YouTube, and then you'll be in the know with everything going on with the Dallas Cowboys as soon as it happens. Other than that, thanks again to everybody, but I'm out.